You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
Today, I have brought back one of the professionals who once co-hosted this program when it was called Both Sides Now. Glen Grigg has provided clinical counseling in the Lower Mainland of Vancouver for 25 years. He teaches in the Master of Counselling program at UBC and at Adler University. And I wanted to sit down with him and ask the question that is almost never really asked, and therefore not really ever answered. What is mental health? So stay tuned. It was an interesting conversation.
Created by your First Nations Health Managers Association, we introduce InfoPoint, a convenient and accessible helpful desk for First Nations health managers looking for credible sources of information on COVID-19. Don't have time to dig? Talk to a real person now at 1-855-446-2719 or email infopoint@fnhma.ca. Indigenous Health Today is another resource of information by region at ihtoday.ca.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm talking with Glen Grigg about mental health. Welcome, Glen.
Good morning, Bernadine. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Well, it's actually nice to be sitting down chatting with you again. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have a conversation on what is mental health. You know, we banter about this word, we throw it out there, and I'm not sure any of us really knows, what does it mean? What does mental health mean? So I'm hoping that you can answer that question for us.
Well, I don't think I can give you a definitive answer, but I think I can come up with some ideas about how to think about mental health and what it is and how to optimize it and how to move toward it.
So if I was to just give you the floor, can you define mental health for us?
Well, I'm going to begin by saying that Dan Siegel has been going around doing workshops on mental health and what it is. And he's somebody who's willing to define it. We'll get to his definition in a moment, but he talks to mental health professionals and he asks them, in all your training about providing mental health services, did anyone define mental health for you? Mm. And the answer is usually no.
Yeah.
In the sense that in traditional medicine, they don't define being healthy except to say it's the absence of disease.
Mm.
And so, of course, we know that that's kind of an inadequate definition of health. So what Dan Siegel has come up with, and I think it's a great starting point for us, is to say that we fall away from mental health when our thinking and our emotions and our behaviors become too rigid or too chaotic. And so we're looking in that place where we have enough structure in our lives that we feel that we have a foundation from which to function, some things we can count on. We don't wake up in the morning and reinvent our whole lives every day. There are some decisions that have already been made. And at the same time, we're not stuck in rigidity. I have to do this or I'm stuck by that. Mm-hmm. And the suggested result is that if your life is not too constrained, and if your life is not too chaotic, what you're going to have available to you are moments and sometimes whole days or even seasons of what is sometimes called flow, where it just your psychological functioning and your social functioning seems to be almost effortless. And artists know this well. Athletes know that sense of flow. I'm in the right space. I'm right there. So that's an interesting definition of mental health to start with, is to be available to the experience of flow.
So I'm just writing that down. Um, so being an artist, I understand when you say the word flow. I get it. I'm not quite sure that I would always be considered mentally well in those moments of flow, because it actually is a state of, for me, it's a state of consciousness. It's
Yes.
like being in a state of mindfulness or meditation.
Yep.
So you're saying that in those moments, I am mentally well. And if I come out of that moment, I'm not mentally well.
Not quite.
Oh, okay.
I was, you never know what to emphasize, but
It's okay.
is that experience of flow available to you?
Oh, I see. Okay.
We can't be in flow all the time. Great book title, After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. Sometimes there are things we need to do that have nothing to do with flow. You just got to get through it.
Right.
So those things count. And of course, that's not the only definition we can give of mental health. But it's a starter.
Mm-hmm. It seems really nebulous, Glenn.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's, I guess I was hoping that there was some finite thing, you can go to the doctor and get a range of blood tests that will tell you basically your body is functioning as it should.
Yes, there you go.
But it doesn't seem to have we don't seem to have the same qualifiers that tell us we are mentally well.
Yeah.
Are there qualifiers? I mean, if somebody came to you and said, I think I need help, how would you determine whether or not they do?
Well, let's go to another place.
Sure.
That's a great question. That sometimes it's, what can you do? What are you capable of doing? That can also define your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you have to be okay all the time. But the great grandfather of psychotherapy, Sigmund Freud, and I want to quickly emphasize that my view of Freud is not particularly negative. It's kind of popular to do that because of some of the misguided ideas that came out clinically from what he wanted to do. But Freud was, I would say, asking most of the right questions, like, does early childhood experience count, and so on. But when he was asked, what constitutes mental health, he said it's the ability to love, to work, and to play. And so that gives us some very different patterns. And then the best version of situating that in the relationship that communities and individuals and groups can have to mental health services comes from a very great therapist named John Weakland. And when John Weakland was reaching the end of his life, it's a recorded fact that this is what he talked about to other therapists, including Paul Václavic, very famous strategic psychotherapist, that he said, I think we didn't describe therapy and well-being adequately. Remember, this is a man who's on his deathbed. Right. That's his mission, is to define, how we get to mental health. And he said, we should have taken out billboards. And what we should have put on the billboards was, if it's the same damn thing every day, go see your therapist. But if it's some damn thing every day, that's your life. Go and enjoy it. So I think that gives us a hint that when we expand on that, one of the things that makes for mental health is if you might be following some patterns in your life, but you're not stuck in those patterns. And the real definition of being stuck in a pattern is an addiction, whether it's a substance addiction or a processing addiction.
Mm-hmm. A processing addiction. That's an interesting term. What is a processing addiction?
Well, a process addiction is that there isn't a substance in play, but it's something that you do that changes your biochemistry such that it functions just the way an addiction would. And usually it's some activity that you do that produces, say, a chemical that is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And if you can get a shot of dopamine from doing that activity, that can at least in the way behaviors function, it can be just like an addiction.
So we could look at sex addiction that would fit within that, hey?
That would fit very,
Okay.
very well, because it gives you a big jolt of those pleasure hormones. Sometimes just turning on the television can be like that. But to come back to this definition of mental health, it's about your life may be patterned, because we can't make 100,000 trivial decisions every day. So most people's lives have some routine and they have some pattern to them. But the patterns don't have you. You have the pattern, and you can move forward. And I would say there's another dimension to that, is that life involves some tasks. There's things you got to do. You got to get grown up. You got to go to school. You have to pay the rent. You have to come up with the groceries. And so mental health is also strongly tied. And this is just empirically, when you measure it, people who are doing relatively well, they have access to the basics of just physical well-being.
Right. Which are?
Well, if we go to a thing called Maslow's hierarchy, I think it's one of the best definitions. And it says, you got to build up things one layer at a time, and you start with your basic needs. And we know this from happiness research, that the more income you have, the happier you get.
Okay.
Except there's a caveat, there's a qualifier to that. Once you have the basics of life, food, shelter, clothing, a bit of transportation, and a few amenities, more income makes no difference
Right.
to your happiness.
Right.
So that's an important one to understand about that. And then Maslow's hierarchy says, then the next thing we need to do is, we need to get our social needs met, and then we get our psychological needs met, and then we get our higher level needs met, like spiritual needs and needs for self-actualization, for saying, I'm not just doing my job, but I'm fulfilling a mission. When I go to work or when I spend time with my family. And so there are these hierarchies of needs and desires. And so I keep dropping names because I'm kind of an academic, so don't be irritated by this. I just have to.
It's fine.
But Martha Nussbaum from University of Chicago has reformulated what makes people happy, because we have this big measurement in the broad culture. How wealthy are we? What's our gross domestic product?
Right.
And is GDP going up? She suggests, and it's very readily measurable, that we should be measuring capabilities. So if you're living in a given place or in a given community, what are you capable of doing? What does that environment open up for you? Are you capable of earning a living? Are there jobs that match your abilities? Are you capable of going to school? And she has marvelous comparisons of two states in India that are side by side. And one has focused on building capabilities for everybody in that population, and the other has focused on raising GDP. We're just going to be wealthier. And the mental health and physical health in the capabilities environment is vastly higher than what it is in the big GDP, although this other state, by all measures, is wealthier. So one of the things we can say about mental health, because one of its correlates is life satisfaction, and especially compassion satisfaction, that I'm able to be one with other people, that has to do with being able to participate actively in your life and know that you make a difference to your own well-being and to the well-being of other people.
Right. We just need to take a little break, Glenn, but we're going to be right back, folks, and continue on this important conversation.
Did you know that Vancouver Co-op Radio CFRO 100.5 FM has over 90 different shows produced by over 350 community members? This wide range of programming produced by our diverse group of programmers ensures that we have a show you'll love. We have shows on feminism, spirituality, disability rights, politics, unions, and parenting. We play jazz, indie rock, reggae, blues, and folk. We broadcast in 12 different languages and have more First Nations programs than any other radio station in Vancouver. Find your show on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. All different, all the time.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm chatting with Glen Grigg about what exactly is mental health. So, Glen, you were talking about building capabilities and its relationship to GDP and all of that stuff. And I can't help but think about all the people I know who have disabilities, whether they're physical or mental, and how that impacts on their capabilities. Even somebody who has ADHD or different levels of autism may have it impact on their ability to do certain things and tasks in life that might be considered basic. So I'm beginning to see how having a physical disability ends up really impacting on your mental health. Am I following that correctly?
Yes, it impacts on your mental health because, it's just intrinsically inconvenient to be disabled in some way. But the real impact psychologically is whether it blocks you from exercising capabilities. And if I may, I want to give an illustration of this. Would that be okay to tell a short story about?
Yeah. Go ahead.
This is a de-identified story. So, I'm part of the intro to this is I'm a psychotherapist. So most of the things I hear are confidential, but this account has been changed so that nobody can be identified. But this particular patient or client, if you like, whichever, was in a situation where if he didn't take an antipsychotic medication, he would have these really vivid, what we call auditory hallucinations. He would hear these different and distinct voices from inside his head. Mm-hmm. And a very, very difficult situation for him.
Can I just ask one question? Should I wait, or do you want me to?
Oh, go ahead, please.
Okay, so you said that hearing the voices was a difficulty for him. How so? What made it difficult?
Well, it turns out that the difficulty when we examine it was, he said, they're just in the way, and if I take medications, it affects my ability to control my skeletal muscles. Some people have that problem with these antipsychotic medications.
Mm-hmm, okay.
And, so what can I do to get rid of the hallucinations?
Right.
Well, taking a capabilities approach to this, I said, well, when have you been just sort of at ease with the hallucinations? And he said, well, there was a time when, everything was great. I had a job working for a donut company. And of course, you have to have all the donuts ready first thing in the morning. So that's a night shift job. And he said, whatever these entities are, the kind of the voices in my head, and they would just get into harmony with me because they loved going to work. And I would have this peaceful time and very, very successful preparing all the donuts for all the drive-throughs that would come in the community in the morning. Okay, well, that sounds pretty good. So, you're capable of earning a living. He said, no, I'm not. He said, because the voices would scream at me so loudly that I just had to scream back at them. And I'd be on the bus on the way to work, and they would kick me off the bus. So our task in terms of good mental health, you would think, good mental health is get rid of the symptoms. But if we get rid of the symptoms, we get rid of much else. And so we worked on having a relationship, having an inner dialogue with those voices, with those auditory hallucinations, such that they would understand that the reason they were getting loud and talking fast and being so irritated was they were excited about getting to work.
Right.
And so once we had that relationship and said, if you get out of hand on the bus, we don't get to go to work. That that worked out just so spectacularly well.
That's great. That
And
sounds very common for people who have dissociative identities. Are you saying he had dissociative identities?
well, I think that's an interesting term. It's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. But there's a way of thinking about this that is more informed by anthropology and more informed by evolutionary theory. And when we look at our central nervous systems, they are a number of different aspects and functions. For instance, we have 6 kinds of memory, and they don't all cooperate with each other. And we have several kinds of attention, and these have evolved over millions and millions and tens and hundreds of millions of years. And so I think most of us experience ourselves as not unitary. We can be happy and sad at the same time. We can be thoughtful and impulsive at the same time. And so this was a more extreme example of parts of this person not only functioning, but sort of trying to function without cooperating with the rest. And so once we had that cooperative relationship established, over a period of time, the amount of intrusion from the voices went down, down, down.
And as I said, that is my experience of when I used to work with folks who had dissociative identities. But so I'm still kind of confused. This person had been on antipsychotics for the voices. Is that right?
Yeah, and at the time, the antipsychotic medications worked quite well to suppress the voices, but they also suppressed a lot of other things as well.
Yeah,
And
I guess, okay, I'm getting off topic here, I think, because I just don't think somebody who's been traumatized and has dissociative identities needs an antipsychotic to stop the voices. They need to do exactly what you did, which is find a way to have all of those different parts, however you want to define them, work together and find a solution, which is what you did. And I know you are not somebody who can prescribe an antipsychotic either, so.
And what I want to emphasize is that there are many pathways to dissociation. And in the case I'm describing, it wasn't brought about by a trauma. It was brought about by a physical anomaly in his prefrontal lobes.
And how was that discovered?
He was being treated by a neuropsychiatrist.
Interesting. I didn't know there was such a thing as a neuropsychiatrist. I'll have to look up that. Yeah.
And
okay. So
I just want to be careful to say that, when we tell these stories, we're not trying to generalize them, because another thing we know about good help with your mental health, getting positive mental health, is very, very individualized.
Yes. And that's why the training is important, right? Is that you are trained in a broad way so that you can find specific help for people. Am I right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, one person who has to, sit in a room with white canvases and somehow get paint on those canvases so that it looks beautiful, that's kind of torture for somebody whose head is full of beautiful music and that's where they want to go, versus somebody who's a visual artist. Like I know you are, Bernadine, that's sort of a version of heaven. And so one of the keys to mental health is to keep in mind that your path is your own. And that what makes your heart sing might be a misery to somebody else. And this is a real challenge to follow, your own unique traits, your own unique capabilities, especially in a culture that kind of celebrates being typical and average. Everybody's got this car, everybody has this address, everybody has 1.2 television sets. Very hard to keep track of that, and yet that seems to be one of the key answers to mental health. Are you living your life?
Interesting. So what brings people in to see a counselor?
Well, I would say there are two things that bring people in to see counselors, two fundamental things. One is that, as I said before, they're stuck in a pattern, and they've done all the right things that should break them out of that pattern, and whatever they've been trying didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you need to work with a therapist. And again, if the therapist is doing a kind of by the diagnostics cookie cutter approach, you feel anxious, and so we have anti-anxiety treatments. Some of that is a little bit helpful, but I'm much more convinced by the idea that these patterns are very individual, and they fit into individual lives. So again, the example of cooking food might be the biggest joy in one person's life, and preparing food might be just a chore in somebody else's life. So being stuck in a pattern, I've tried real hard to get out of it, can't get out of that pattern, or I want to set a new pattern and the old one just takes over and I can't set this new pattern. And then I think another major category of where people really benefit from therapy is that they have some kind of life task that they need to get done. And for whatever reason, they're not able to engage with that task and get on with it. So somebody who is, 35 years old and living with their parents and have never held a job, but they have, all the physical things you need in your life, there are probably some life tasks that they'd like to get on with, like paying the rent yourself, buying the groceries yourself, living independently, getting somebody to love you who doesn't have to. Those are important life tasks, and often we can't get engaged with those.
So if somebody has disabilities, then are we perceiving them as having a mental health issue when in fact they have a disability issue?
Well, one of the things we can construe, and I'm going to use myself as an example here, is that I do some public speaking and I do some teaching, and I was taking this sort of what you might call a disability approach to myself. And one of my mentors said, that's really great. I want you to teach this class and teach it to other people. You have a good way of putting it across. Very complimentary. And my response was, well, I can't do that because I'm really, really shy. And shyness is genetically loaded. It goes through my family. I'm not, that's just not going to change.
Right.
So I'm kind of stuck. I can't be a teacher. I might be able to write books, but I can't be a teacher. And my mentor just looked at me and he said, well, yeah, you can be a teacher, but you have to teach in a shy way.
Interesting. How do you teach in a shy way, Glenn?
What you do, and this is another of these keys to mental health, I would say, is that when you get up to teach and you're a shy person, as I am, if you get in a fight with that shyness, don't be shy, be outgoing, and so on, it's a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And the key to that is accept it, that I'm shy right now, and I can be shy and I can be articulate at the same time.
Right.
And that's coming back to not only self-acceptance, but the acceptance of complexity in human experience. So one of the things that comes up quite a bit is, the old, that pervasive problem that almost all of us have in sustaining our mental health is the degree and quality of emotional arousal we're experiencing. So high levels of emotional arousal with a really negative connotation, something bad's going to happen, that's anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sort of formulas that is, just go to the internet or buy popular self-help books is, well, it's anxiety that's getting in the way of your well-being, so we need to bring the anxiety down.
And how do you bring anxiety down?
Well, I would say that one of the things about bringing anxiety down is that that's just a mistaken prescription in most cases.
What do you mean?
I mean, I have to be, completely in control of my anxiety before I can make a friend, because I'm friendless. Say, well, how about, finding a way to get some social support and building some friendships in kind of an anxious way.
Right. Just like you did. You taught being shy.
Yeah.
Now, anxiety, though, can get very debilitating. And I know this because during COVID, one of the things that happened for me is my iron levels, excuse me, went way down. And when your iron levels are way down, one of the things that happens, lots of things that happen, it can be actually very dangerous to your physical body.
Yes, absolutely.
But it also creates a high level of anxiety. And so I was having a very difficult time even functioning in the world. Just as you have mentioned, are you functioning? I couldn't do very much. I couldn't get on the phone. I was having a hard time getting out of my house because I was living in this high anxiety. And of course, I went to my GP, and the first thing she did, I don't have her anymore, was prescribe an antidepressant for me. And I took it for about a month, and it seemed to work, but then it didn't, and the anxiety came back. And it did other things. The antidepressant did other things. It caused a tremor in my hands and muscle spasms all over my body. It was not good. It was not a good thing. It actually took over a year for the tremor in my hand to go away, and which is a big deal because I'm an artist. I can't have a tremor in my right hand. But what she didn't do is send me for an iron test.
There you go.
And so it was presumed I was depressed and that was causing my anxiety when really I needed a $3 bottle of iron pills. And within 2 weeks, the internist is who picked it up, and another doctor that I went to see who sent me to him. And within 2 weeks, I was feeling much, much better. So sometimes, again, physical disability, which low iron really isn't, but was for me, can end up having us think we're having a mental health issue when what we have is a physical disability that's preventing us from being capable or doing the tasks that we need to do. So I really didn't need a mental health intervention. I needed a medical intervention. And for some people who have permanent disabilities, that medical intervention isn't solving their ability to be able to perform tasks. So I'm just wondering how we parse that out.
Yeah. Well, I want to go two places with that wonderful story. Not wonderful in your experience.
You know what? But we have to just take a break, Glenn. I'm sorry. I did this. We just have to take a break. We'll be right back, folks.
Eof Tanuyap. Quiget Yuans Quiensna. Hi, everybody. My name is Quiget Yuans. I'm a member of the Squamish Nation and the Yagalanas clan of the Haida Nation. You're listening to Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We live, work, play, and broadcast from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
I was searching, I was looking for meaning. I was wondering, desperately trying only to see I have nothing missing. Who said I have to find who I am? Who said that I am lost to begin with? I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. Each morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for the beauty around me. Life is a gift, I wanna enjoy it. Always proving my worth only destroys it. I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. My motivation can't be validation. I'd always be starving for more affection, the wrong attention, only to feel like I am nothing. Who said I have to find who I am. Who said that I am lost to begin with? I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. Each morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for the beauty around me. Life is a gift, I wanna enjoy it. Always proving my worth only destroys it. I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. Oh yeah. I have nothing to find and everything to feel. Only I can define what is meaningful to me. Even when I am feeling so breakable, I tell myself to believe I am valuable. I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. Each morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for the beauty around me. Yeah. Life is a gift, I wanna enjoy it. Always proving my worth only destroys it. I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. Each morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for the beauty around me. Yeah. Life is a gift, I wanna enjoy it. Always proving my worth only destroys it. I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. I was searching, I was looking for meaning. I was wondering, desperately trying only to see I have nothing missing. Who said I have to find who I am? Who said that I am lost to begin with? I am already enough. Everything I need is within me. Each morning when I wake up, I'm grateful for the beauty around me. Life is a gift, I wanna enjoy.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm talking with Glen Grigg about mental health. And we left in the middle of a discussion, and I had asked Glen, when we have physical disabilities that are impacting on our ability to do tasks, how do we parse out if that is a mental health issue or a disability issue?
Yeah.
And Glen, you were going to say something, and I had to stop you. Sorry.
Well, one of the things that we do culturally, because it's just so useful, is we kind of package up problems into little packages. And so, if you have a sore throat, you take a medication that's specific to sore throats. And if you have a sprained ankle, you don't treat your knee or your hips, you treat your ankle. And one of the ways that mental health is different, and it links into general physical health as well, is that we don't have these specific effects. And low iron is just a great example that having low iron is going to affect all the neurotransmitters throughout your body.
Right.
And it's going to make a difference. And so you can't tell what the problem is by tracking the symptoms. So you have to do a blood test in your case that would show low iron. And then similarly, when you took the antidepressant, it in turn would change the neurotransmitters. And you saw that through how it made a difference to your ability to control or not control your skeletal muscles when you were taking that medication. So mental health is the entire system, and it's not separable from physical health. One of the early examples, this research was done in the 1950s when they were trying to figure out how some people survived the really terrible internments that happened during the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
And when they would use light hypnotic trance to induce a state of discouragement in people and then take a blood sample, they would find that their immune system had been suppressed. And when they put them in a light trance, acknowledging everything that's wrong, but also saying, the future looks pretty good, and there's nothing here you can't handle, and let's get on with it. And then you take a blood sample. That blood sample shows that their immune system has perked up.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go in, and get these medical tests, which I encourage everyone to do if you're thinking about seeking a mental health service at all, see a family physician and make sure that you're just generally well, especially the kinds of things that show up in blood tests and urine tests, that these things are tied together. They're not separate. So I wanted to emphasize that, and I also wanted to highlight the outcomes of some of the largest studies of depression that have ever been done.
Right.
And some people took medications that are called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And serotonin seems to be one of those feel-good neurotransmitters. And if we don't have enough of it, we don't feel good. And when people took those medications, their serotonin went up. But other people were assigned to a condition where they didn't get medications, where they got cognitive behavioral therapy for,
Mm-hmm.
and they also became, their condition was also improved, and they also had improved serotonin levels in their bodies. So the way to pick up the serotonin, there are a number of pathways you can do that. And they're not mutually exclusive. It all works together.
That is interesting. I don't know about serotonin, but I know with dopamine, you can do things like even smiling at somebody can increase not only your dopamine, but somebody else's dopamine, and on and on and on. So there are ways of activities that we can engage in that will increase our dopamine. I don't know about serotonin, but.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, coming back to mental health, I've got to work this in someplace, that there are a couple of lines of research that have shown that people who have very positive mental health tend to have a characteristic of not being particularly egotistic, but so I want to be careful to say that's not what I mean, but they have a high capacity for self-acceptance. That's the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not a walking battleground. They say,
Right.
yeah, I get really nervous before, I have to talk in front of a group. And instead of saying, I wish I wasn't such a goof and, getting nervous about something they don't have those kinds of thoughts. They have the kind of thoughts, yeah, I remember when I was a little kid, I was nervous. And now I'm nervous again. And once I get started, it'll be okay. And so there's that self-acceptance that goes with this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another dimension of mental health where the people who have this quality of mental health are described by researcher Brene Brown as being wholehearted. And Brene Brown began looking at mental health by saying, what are we going to do about shame?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to research shame because that holds people back. And it was that basic idea about, well, if shame is the problem and we remove the problem, then we'll be okay.
Right.
And said, no, there's we don't have to do anything about shame, because what shame is, in her formulation, the way she studied it, and published many highly regarded scientific studies about this, is that we understand our own uniqueness and our own specialness, the way that we're different from anybody else, as being kind of embarrassing and not very acceptable, and something that you should cover up,
Right.
and something that other people couldn't see. And that our culture tends to give us that message that if somebody knew that, you'd like to, I don't know, binge watch old comedy shows or something like that. If they knew that about you, they would form a very negative opinion and they couldn't love you.
Hmm.
So her research shows that the shame is something that almost everybody has. And if you take away the shame, it doesn't help, because the source of the shame is to be able to, again, it's something like accepting who you are, and also saying that I need to let other people know all the ways I'm unique and different, and not be embarrassed by that.
Hmm.
That no, I don't like sprinkles on my ice cream and everybody else does. Or I worry about space aliens, even though I'm a highly educated person who knows that the probability of that is almost nil.
Yeah, I don't think those are the things that are causing people shame, though.
Yeah,
Most of the things that cause us shame are things that, traumatize us in some ways, or, the shame that we can't get over, or we have a hard time finding self-acceptance around.
yeah.
So,
Well, an example was, I happened to be spending a day with some of the teachers from Georgetown University, where they have a fantastic program in family therapy. And one of the instructors said, I don't know what's going on for me today, but I'm not functioning very well. I keep interrupting people and giving way to annoyance and so on. He said, just when you think you're a grown up, you find out you're a little kid all over again. And he just had a laugh about that.
yeah.
And most people, wouldn't look you in the eye, especially in a fairly prestigious professional thing, and say, I haven't got to the root of it yet, but I'm being pretty childish today. And so this person wasn't ashamed of that. And he was owning up to some of the things he'd been doing, was being abrupt and interrupting other people. And it just turned him into a lovable presence in the room, in spite of the fact that he'd just been annoying and irritating and insulting some people.
Hmm.
And when they were able to understand where that came from, it made a huge difference. So our ability to accept, there's an interesting word. I like the word weirdness. If you can accept everything that makes you weird. And another very famous practitioner and researcher in mental health, Milton Erickson, said, whatever makes you weird is your personal treasure. It's what makes you lovable, and it's the basis of your creativity and your enjoyment of life. Pretty strong statement.
Hmm.
But I would suggest that's very true. And so this, we've been talking about physical bodies, we've been talking about psychology, and this brings the social world into it.
Right.
That is it okay for me to be known to other people, and not some kind of made up play acting version of what I think they'd like, but the real me.
And what if it's not okay? What if what makes you strange and weird, and causes you shame, is not acceptable in the world? Then
Yeah. Well, you need some good social judgment with that. That not everybody can hear or watch all the videotape that you have that isn't ready for primetime broadcast. But I would say that most of us who are functioning at a fairly high level in the world, we have a very small inner circle of people who know us well. and they really get to see the inside of who you are. And so this is why family relationships and couples relationships and best friend relationships are full of conflict, because we're taking these big chances. And then we have another circle of people who know us fairly well. And so we can kind of talk with them. But if we really opened our hearts to them over lunch, there'd be a big rift in the relationship, because it'd be emotionally overwhelming for them. Like your mother died 15 years ago and you couldn't get out of bed for grief yesterday. Yeah, it was the anniversary of her death and it just laid me out. That doesn't work over lunch with a lot of folks. So you need to use that judgment. And then because pretty much everybody lives in cities, you have to almost like put on a uniform when you're walking down the street saying, this is who I am. And then everybody's got some kind of clue about how to treat you.
Right.
However, there's another relationship in the community that I want to identify, which is if you find that there's nobody that you can open up to about what's going on inside you without having a major rift or damage to that relationship, that's the material you need to tell to your therapist.
If you have a therapist, and
if,
of course,
if you have a therapist,
yes,
because that's what therapists are trained for. And then when you can come to terms with that material and be able to articulate it and be able to share it with other people in ways that are not going to cause them a huge amount of distress, then you're going to be able to be your authentic self when you're with other people. So you're not going to be burdened by this, even if people like me, they only like the part I'm playing. They don't like the real me. That's a huge problem for sustaining mental health. Or say, if they really, really knew me, they couldn't love me. To have worked on your relationship with yourself. Can I accept those parts of myself? And can I communicate them to other people?
So what happens if somebody doesn't have a therapist, Glenn? I mean, lots of people don't. They can't afford the $100 and some an hour to go and do that over a long period of time. Even if it's say 3 months, you're talking $1,200 to be able to talk about this thing that you can't talk about with anybody else. Is it something that, is there some other way of doing this that doesn't require a therapist?
Well, one of the things we know about happiness and one of the things we know about mental health is that people have close, loving relationships. And so one of the things that we can do is we can find relationships and use good judgment about it. And this is one of the things you got to develop is good judgment, that there are some people who can know you at a really deep level, and that's good for you to be known at a really deep level. It also makes you incredibly vulnerable.
Right.
And so to choose safe relationships, and I know this is your line of country, that society has said there are experiences and psychologies and social circumstances that create a need for professionalizing that level of acceptance, which is why we have therapists in the community.
Right.
However, there are other figures. I think about the role of pastors and other clergy, that we really trust them. I'm thinking about the role of very close friendships. I'm thinking about the things that loving spouses can do for each other that nobody else can do for them. I'm also thinking about the power of groups. Self-help groups are just absolutely magical. And so, when you can come into a group, and Alcoholics Anonymous is one example of that. Hi, my name is Glenn and I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
What a way to be able to start. That might be the most shameful or shame-provoking dimension of selfhood if you happen to have problematic alcohol use in your process.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that when you get on the bus, you say, "Hi, everybody, I'm an alcoholic."
That's true. Actually, you are landing us back to the thing that I believe is one of the most healing things that we can offer another human being, and we can do it anywhere at any time, which is just provide acceptance. This is who you are. This is how you come to me, and that's fine. That's where we
Yes.
start. So thank you, Glenn. That's been a wonderful conversation. And again, it's been very informative. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
What a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll be right back, folks.
Hey, did you know Red Eye has a podcast? You can tune in to Red Eye every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to noon, and now you can catch our interviews anytime. Look for the Red Eye podcast on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, or a host of other podcast apps. Or you can check out our latest episode right on our website, coopradio.org/redeye.
So, mental health. Even after a good conversation with Glenn about mental health and what it is, I confess that I still feel that what defines mental health is vague. We can clearly say what mental health problems look like. We have defined what is called abnormal psychology to the hilt, almost especially over the last couple decades, using the DSM, which was described to me by professionals as a necessary tool so that doctors could bill for seeing their clients, which means every client had to have a diagnosis for them to be paid. And consequently, the DSM basically covers everything it means to be human. It is not uncommon for me to talk with folks who have various diagnoses, from paranoid schizophrenia and then re-diagnosed as bipolar 2 and then to borderline, etc. You name it. It makes it hard when a diagnosis changes so much over time to take it seriously. And yet, while not clearly identifying what is mental health, we are clearly able to name every human emotion as a disease. That said, I appreciate Glenn for coming in and tackling this topic with me. As Glenn said, in his opinion, mental health is basically being able to function without becoming rigid, erratic, or chaotic, and that you're able to flow with social functions and are available to experience that flow. And while he said a whole lot more than that, I'm hoping that that is a good paraphrase. If you have a different definition of mental health, we want to hear it. Send it to us. And if you have questions for Glenn, given this conversation, send them in. I'll get him back to answer them for you. My thanks to Glen Grigg for chatting with me, to Fearless Soul and Sherry Ulrich for the gift of their music. But most importantly, and as always, my thanks goes out to you for joining me today. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.